What is happening out there in podcast land? Welcome to Mass Faces and Secret Bases. I'm your host, Mick Jamison. This episode, we're covering the Marvel graphic novel Revenge of the Living Monolith. And here to help me sift through the rubble are my co-hosts, Movie Matt and Todd Saroyce. Boys, how we doing?
We're doing good.
Doing good. Thank you for having me.
So, let's just get into it. And we were talking before hitting record that this was the first time that I actually have read this graphic novel. And what I was thinking of, because it was the first time I read it, I went online and kind of wanted to gauge what reactions were from fanboys and just various people who had read it. And it's funny because the reaction I got was mostly, eh. And that wasn't the reaction that I have to this, especially because as a graphic novel, yes, it's a story that it's not continuity changing or some big time like crossover event. But if you look a little bit deeper into it, there are a lot of things that are happening in and around this graphic novel, both real life wise and just within the Marvel universe, that make it not only interesting and not exactly groundbreaking, but there are things that looking at it from almost 40 years later, there are certain aspects of it that did grow in importance over the years. So I we're going to get right into it. I wanted to get your guys' reaction to Matt. I know this is one that you had read previously, correct?
Yes, I actually picked this up when it came out, or at least shortly after, and it has long been my favorite comic book story of all time.
I didn't realize of all time.
Of all time.
Okay.
I picked this up initially because Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four were in it, and this comic helped cement Captain America as my favorite character, and has been my favorite character for, almost 40 years now. But before, just prior to this, Spider-Man was my favorite. And I think a lot of the people who maybe don't appreciate this as much as I do are forgetting about the time it was created in. Because as we'll get into it when we're discussing the story, the pathos that is provided to this villain was really kind of unheard of up until that time. I mean, now, nowadays, a lot of the villains have given a more fleshed out backstory. But back when, comics were really being put out, it was like you got your superpowers, and then depending usually on your upbringing or social status, you became a superhero or a supervillain. And supervillains were usually like, okay, I'm going to go start robbing banks right now. Whereas the living monolith really is somebody you can sympathize with very easily reading the story.
And Todd, this was your first experience with it, or did you know growing up with Matt that this was his favorite comic book story of all time?
I don't think I knew it was his favorite, and I probably didn't. And I knew it by name because he had referenced it a few times. I don't think I had seen it before. I can't remember for sure if I read it, because if I did, it was probably in '85 or '86. But when he showed it to me, I did recognize immediately as something that I had seen him with an awful lot, or just kind of like around his room, or usually available in some way. So I imagine, Matt, you must read it a lot.
Well, that, and for, when we were younger, it wouldn't fit in a regular sized comic book storage box. So it kind of had to be left, lying around.
That's the bane of all comic book
That's
collectors. It's like it just will not fit with the other ones, and it's just the OCD that most of us have. It's just
that explains a lot, actually, because one of the reasons why, because I remember this especially, and I've talked about it before, God Loves, Man Kills. I remember these especially being out all the time, which is ultimately why I think I finally picked up God Loves, Man Kills, just looking for something to read. And it's something that I had walked by. It's one of those things like when you go to if you used to go to Blockbuster or something, or I guess even now on Netflix, where you pass by something constantly, and then eventually you're like, all right, fine. you know so okay, that explains a lot. This was an awful lot of fun. I think this is a great, maybe not quite like epic, but also sort of epic feeling story. I like the large size for it, in trade. I didn't know they were doing graphic novels like this that far back. Or I guess I didn't realize exactly how old these were. Um, but yeah, this was a lot of fun. Uh, I believe, yeah, all the characters are acquitted well. Like you said, Matt, I think what stuck out to me the most was just the amount of the sympathy they give to the villain. Um, Now, had this character, the villain, I mean, was he invented for this book, or had he existed before?
No, he had appeared in the X-Men earlier.
Okay, as the living monolith.
I believe he was going by the Living Pharaoh at that time.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, this was very, and it wasn't planned out, but I think this is, and like you're both saying, I mean, it adds so much to the character. I think unwittingly, this served to do to this character what later graphic novels specifically did for, and I'm not putting them on the same level, but like something like A Killing Joke, where they were decided to flesh out the character of the Joker, or I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but where they would specifically say, okay, we're going to give a backstory and we're going to flesh out this villain and make him a little bit more multi-dimensional. I don't think they went into it thinking. I mean, I think they wanted to give him a backstory, but I don't think that Michelini realized what he was doing was going to make us sympathize with this character, and I think that adds to the power of the story, that we can all feel that from reading it.
No, it didn't feel like forced or anything like
Mhm.
that. Like everything about what they did felt natural and almost movie like. Like this would make an excellent screen adaptation.
Well,
And
I
it
mean,
worked. I
the
was going to say it works too, because I mean, he's an X-Men villain, but he is not like a big time like heavy hitter. So yeah, he was introduced in he's a mutant. So um
Makes sense.
but he wasn't like some kind of like
That
big
makes sense.
time heavy hitter. So that's also the best, again, when you're working with these type of characters. He's almost like a blank slate. You can do whatever you want with him.
yeah, he was basically plucked from obscurity. I mean, he came from just about the time that the X-Men book was being canceled and going into reruns. We're
Yeah, I think
talking we're talking pre Wolverine X-Men.
Yeah, I think I knew him from a
Oh
Marvel
wow.
team up, or it might have even been like a Marvel Tales like reprint of a Marvel team up with like Spider-Man and Havoc, I think, fighting him, that I had. So, I mean, I think that was the only story before this that I'd actually ever read. And I think he might have been the living monolith in that. I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and try to find that. But yeah, that was the only experience I ever had with him before this.
Did he have basically the same powers, mannerisms, like he grows real big, I guess, or
No, that was developed for this.
specific? Okay, I guess that was the impression that I was getting. So what was he before that?
Well, he could kind of generate force blasts, and he had like his cult of followers as the Living Pharaoh.
Got it.
I don't know a whole lot about him prior to this. I don't. I've never read X-Men comics from that period. It's only the fact that they appear in one panel of this graphic novel that I even really knew he was an X-Men villain.
Got it.
Yeah, so do we want to get into it? I mean,
Yeah,
starting off, and like I said, it's a striking cover. It really is. Without the context that we're going to have for it in 1985, they obviously didn't have that context, but it was still a striking cover. So it's Marvel graphic novel number 17. It came out in October of '85, and it was $6.95 back then. So I mean, like we were discussing beforehand. I mean, I looked that up. That would be like $20 in 2024 terms. So you were making an investment if you were buying this.
It is a beautiful cover.
Um,
it's set up to look like a disaster movie of the times. If you look at
yeah,
if you look at the old disaster movie posters, you will have, like, there's the large picture, and then in little squares off to the side or at the bottom, you'll have pictures of the cast all sort of reacting to a disaster going on around them. So they knew exactly what the feel of the story was going to be when they made this cover.
Yeah, disaster movies, and I also was reminded of the King Kong like '76
Yeah,
movie poster with him standing on the World Trade Center. So that, I mean, that's what, for people who don't know or have never seen it, it's basically the living monolith grown to extraordinary heights, basically smashing a fist through one of the World Trade Centers and breaking the World Trade Center in half. And now looking at it, of course, uh, that brings back memories of that fateful day in 2001. But in 1985, it was just a really cool cover.
yeah,
Um,
and monster movies had used the Twin Towers before on their
yep.
posters for an epic scale. You know, not only the King Kong remake, but I believe Godzilla versus Gigan has the monsters atop the Twin Towers.
And as I had previously said, this is by written by Dave Michelini, art by Mark Silvestri, which it's one of the his earliest works, I think, for Marvel or for any comics at all. And inked by Jeff Isherwood. There's a bunch of others, but he's the main inker. And like Matt said, you see the blocks on the side with Spider-Man, Captain America, the Human Torch, She-Hulk, Mr. Fantastic, Thor for some reason, because as we'll see, Thor is not really in this as much. And as we discovered, there is a block with the Invisible Girl, but I mean, obviously, you just can't see it because it's the Invisible Girl. So, and she was not the Invisible Woman yet; she was still the Invisible Girl. So.
So,
Um,
as you gave those credits, but I think we have to really give credit to, well, he goes by Christopher Priest or just Priest
you
now,
know,
but it was James Owsley, who was an editor at the time. He was the one that came up with the concept. That's credited in the inside page with a little forward by David Michelini about how James Owsley came up with a contract where concept where he said, I want to do the monster that trashed New York, something on a big scale, like those old 50s monster movies. We're going to call it, are you ready for this? The Revenge of the Living Monolith. And it's a nice little blurb that goes into how, you know, everybody around the bullpen was kind of scoffing and snickering and thinking about how silly the story was going to be. And as they worked on the story, people started to come around and say, you know, well, this looks really cool, and can I get a copy when it comes out?
yeah, isn't that weird? I did read that too, and it was really charming, the little introduction. But you would think that if they knew they were doing it as a graphic novel and they were going to get to just draw like widespread destruction, they would be more excited about it, other than like scoffing and laughing about it. But I was a little bit surprised by that. I thought that would be, for me as like a comic artist, I would be licking my chops, being like, okay, I get to like destroy like a city with and do like a '50s monster movie. I would think that would be a cool concept. So I was kind of surprised. I mean, they do say when the art started coming in and people then were looking at it, they kind of were like, oh, this is going to be something that's really cool.
And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the time period where it had been like several years since a Godzilla movie had been made, and also several years since the disaster movies were, you know, popular at the box office. So it was probably one of those like, well, isn't that quaint and silly, you know, that you're going to do something like that again?
Yeah. Yeah, so as we start out, we are introduced to Ahmet Abdul, who is then the living pharaoh. This is 1950, though, so we get, again, like we said, we're getting a little bit of backstory that we never got, or that it seems like he never got in his previous appearances, and this serves to make us sympathetic to the character. I mean, we're introduced to him right off the bat, and he's being bullied by kids in the neighborhood because he believes that he is an ancestor to the ancient pharaohs of Egypt. And we see that they're getting picked on. There is a girl that he grows up with, um, that he eventually does fall in love with, who, is by his side. And they show he eventually does go to university, and he's studying.
Well, before we go too fast, just
Oh
because
god.
like right on the first two pages, you get the splash page. You get the first page is a splash page of him, you know, surrounded by, you know, four other kids, and he's just talking about, you know, he's playing, he's
Mm-hmm.
making make believe where I'm a king and I'm a pharaoh, and they're just having even the other kids who seem to be his friends are a little like, oh, here goes,
There he goes
here
again.
he goes again. But then out of nowhere comes, Hassan, who obviously has a crush on Feline himself and isn't happy that she's hanging out with this dork. And he just comes up and smashes the kid in the head. And the girl's like, are you okay? Are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine, Feline. They sniff. They did not hurt me. And just this look, this drawing on the final panel of page 2, it breaks your heart.
Yeah. I
And
think
this
all.
kid minding his own business, having fun, getting beat up.
Yeah, and I think people who, especially as me as a kid in the early '80s, as reading comic books, it's not like I was like super popular, so that was something I could kind of relate to. It's not like I was having things thrown at me in the street, but I think, and I don't want to, I don't want to say that all kids who were reading comic books back then were outsiders or weren't popular, but I'm sure most of them kind of felt that way because it's not like today where all comic book culture is out there in the open. It wasn't like that back then. So again, right there, you're starting to feel sympathy for this character right off the bat on the second page of the graphic novel.
All right, now as you were saying, he goes up with Feline. They get married, have a baby girl, and he does his studies at a university.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and then that's where he is lecturing at a
Yes.
university where he is giving his theory that the pharaohs were actually mutants who had mutant powers, and the crowd there does not take kindly to this.
It is not well received.
No, they basically start to riot and chase him off the stage and out of the hall that he's lecturing in. They're throwing rocks at the car that he's driving away, and so he's like speeding through the streets trying to get away from this crowd while he's also remembering his childhood being made fun of because of how of these theories that he had and his, I mean, you could kind of say it, his delusions of grandeur. And while this is going on, he basically crashes the car.
Well, and again, the tragedy of him crashing the car is, as he's trying to escape this mob, the reason he crashes the car is because there's kids playing in the street, so he swerves to avoid them. Again, this is he's not a monster yet. He's not, he's not like, oh, I can't hurt these. He sees these kids. I can't hurt these kids. So he swerves, flips over his car. He and his, baby daughter, Salome, are thrown clear of the wreckage, but Feline is trapped inside.
And the crowd is standing there basically looking at him while he's frantically trying to get the door open. He's calling to them to help him, and they don't.
Nope, they just stand aside watching stone-faced, and the car explodes, and his beloved life is killed.
And that's when, and I think this is part of Marvel lore with mutants. I think when they finally do discover their mutant power, it's usually it usually manifests itself in a time of stress or
great emotion,
and that's what it basically. He blasts the crowd that's there with an energy beam while he's holding his child, and just out of nowhere a person comes up to him who knows his name and tells him that he's much more than he thinks he is, and tells him that he has a destiny to be a master. Now, in this panel, this character is not identified, but it was later retconned that this is the character Apocalypse. And I only know that because of the research I was doing, just reading about this comic. So I don't know if that was like a controversial retcon. I don't know if that fits in with like continuity or anything like that. But basically, that's supposed to be the character, the X-Men villain Apocalypse.
Yeah, I mean, Apocalypse hadn't been created yet. I think he's still like 2 or 3 years coming, but it doesn't hurt the story at all. It doesn't really affect anything, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And then after that, we get kind of like a montage of him becoming the Living Pharaoh, of him fighting the X-Men. I mean, you see the X-Men basically in one panel, and he just relays his defeats by the X-Men. And we just come to realize that this is basically him dreaming because he is imprisoned. He's probably imprisoned by the X-Men after one of his failed attempts. And he's kind of got like, I guess I describe them as like shackles on his hands to
prevent him from using his powers.
Prevent him from using his powers. And then he discovers that the person who was making fun of him as a kid, Hassan, is one of the guards in the prison that he's at,
who's still bullying him.
Yeah, who's still calling him a wimp, basically. And I did have a question where some of the dialogue for like Hassan, you almost feel like it should be like a New York, like Brooklyn guy talking to him almost. I mean, I guess they had to kind of make it where everybody, I mean, you're still kind of writing for like 10 to 12-year-olds, so he's calling him a wimp and all that kind of stuff. But maybe I'm just used to when writers are trying to write like Middle Eastern characters or something like that, they kind of have I don't even know how to describe the dialogue, but it just like it seemed to me that it was almost like a neighborhood like Brooklyn like dialogue they had for some of the Middle Eastern characters.
I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that it's translated
from the yes.
From Egyptian to like modern American English at the time.
Yeah. But so we have Hassan still like kneeling at him, still calling him a wimp. But the Living Pharaoh reveals that he's basically been, I think he's been like building up the pressure within like the shackles that are holding his hand so that he can blast through the shackles.
Yes.
And he blasts Hassan into a brick wall. And
embeds him into the wall without killing him somehow.
Yeah. I don't know if he has like control over the blast, kind of like Cyclops has control over his optic blasts.
Right, but the wall is the presumably concrete wall is like shattered.
Yeah, so his back would just be like destroyed.
He exploded.
Yeah, you were talking at least a busted spine and ruptured kidneys.
Mm-hmm. And I do feel bad for his minions too, because he blasts the hole in the roof of the jail, and they come in and they tell him that they've been waiting there for like months and months on end because they knew he was eventually going to escape. So they were just like hanging around, just waiting. I mean, imagine like pulling that duty. Like, all right, okay, we're here again, another night.
What
imagine the prison guards coming in for their shift and saying, "Huh, those cultists are still hanging around out there. Well, they don't seem to be bothering anybody."
I'm sure not. Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be no problem from that.
But yeah, we get this really, fun, stunning jailbreak scene of all of, the Living Pharaoh's, soldiers storming the prison and having a shootout with the guards and their escape. But as they escape, Abdul says, "Bring him with us," pointing to Hassan, who's, like I said, embedded in this wall. So, again, the minions are like, "Okay, so we're firing at these guys, helping to cover your escape, and you want us to chisel out this wall section and take it? Okay, yep, you're the master."
Hey, you know what you're signing up for when you're signing up to be a minion. I mean, you can work your way up the ladder, but when you're starting, you're basically hanging around waiting for the Living Pharaoh to break out of jail, or you're like chiseling out his childhood bully that he embedded into a wall, and that's going to be your job. But I was going to say though,
a scoop or a scrape.
Well, I do like how we've been saying like, oh, that Michelini is making us sympathize with him, but then he does have two of his minions that are left behind that he just basically kills and just doesn't care at all. So it just goes to show you he's not totally sympathetic. He's still a bastard.
No,
but they're minions, though.
But exactly. We should also point out that these aren't just hired thugs. These are people who are actually devoted to him.
Yeah.
To
Yes.
them, he is their king and pharaoh and god.
Hmm.
So they are completely devoted to him, body and soul.
And I will say, as you were just saying, also that it was like of the time where people, um, now say, it's not that great, but they're not realizing that for like 1985, there is I feel like there's an unusual amount of violence. I mean, it's not, there's no gore or anything like that, but you know, obviously, half of Manhattan is getting destroyed, so you're seeing that, and they do mention like casualties, and you do see people dying. But even like in the Prison Break, I mean, there are guards, and there are minions just
Getting
randomly
killed.
being cut down, shot, being
And
killed. So.
what's cool about it is the living monolith is just swaggering through all the carnage and gunfire, just like
Hmm.
Darth Vader in the opening of Star Wars. He's just walking straight through it, all upright and majestic, while all this chaos is going on around him. Because
Hmm.
as far as he's concerned, he's the living pharaoh. He's a king. He's a god. So we cut to New York, where an attractive young woman is approaching the Baxter building to talk to the Fantastic Four. She has some important information for them.
And I will
And
say this is why I do love Marvel, and I do love the interconnectedness of Marvel, that I love like the Baxter building is like such an integral part of the city and Manhattan, that it's a place where people go. Like, I think they would talk in like the comics that they would have like tourists would just go in there to see it, because the Fantastic Four in that universe are like rock stars. So it's like, if you're looking for help and you're in Manhattan, and you can't go to Avengers Mansion, then you're going to the Baxter building to try to enlist the Fantastic Four to help you.
well, and it's also was like kind of like almost a museum of science, where like they did have tours and stuff for people to go look at in the Baxter
Mhm.
building. So she's approaching the Baxter building when she's cut off by three of the living pharaoh's minions, and they're just about to kill her when Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, shows up and saves her.
And let me tell you, I love how Silvestri draws him in his Human Torch mode. I think he looks great. The Human Torch sometimes, if like John Byrne, I thought always drew the Human Torch really really well. But there are times, if you don't, if it's an artist who doesn't draw the Human Torch well, it can kind of look corny basically. But I love how Silvestri draws the Human Torch. I think it looks very very cool.
The way he's inked and colored as well makes him look like he is, just a flaming ember in human form.
Yeah.
So he melts the guns of the Pharaoh's minions, and of course, being Johnny Storm, and there's an attractive woman, he comes in all swagger and is like, hey, so what can I do? And she's like, I have important, news for you. The entire world might be destroyed. And he's like, huh, again? All right, well, let me take you in. I'll introduce you to Reed, Sue, and She-Hulk, and we'll see how we can handle this situation.
It does just make you think, like, when you wake up every morning, it's like, all right, I gotta, like, for me, it's like, I gotta get the kids ready, and I hope they don't have that much homework tonight. For like the Fantastic Four and stuff, it's like, again, it's like they're done one thing. It's like, all right, I just want to like take off my boots and rest for a second. There's somebody else who's telling me that the world is gonna end. All right, here we go again.
Can I just I just need a ruling on on the previous page. Like, how does one vaporize an energy bolt?
By being hotter than the energy he basically converted the energy into another form through heat.
Did you miss that in high
Sure.
school?
Okay.
Come
All
on.
right. Fair enough. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the comic physics.
It would be like trying to send an electrical bolt at the sun. It would be vaporized by the heat long before it got there. That's science.
Obviously.
So basically, this young woman is trying to tell the Fantastic Four about another threat, and how she has this object that she thinks that Reed should study, it's probably part of the living pharaoh. She basically explains like the living pharaoh is at it again, and why don't you take this device because I think it's important to his plans. And Reed's like, all right, well we'll take this up to my lab and study it, and Johnny, you stay here and watch after this young lady and protect her. And she's like, well, if it's all the same to you, could She-Hulk stay and protect me? Because, you know, Johnny Storm's a little put off by it, but, honestly, I'd rather have the She-Hulk hanging out and protecting me than Johnny Storm.
Well, I do love that. I do love her line when she's like, "How about them apples, champ?" And I was gonna add that this is a good segue because I was gonna say She-Hulk and the Fantastic Four. Fan of that or not a fan? I grew up with her as a member of the Fantastic Four already, so I actually think of her as a member of the Fantastic Four. I like that era of the Fantastic Four with the She-Hulk as a member.
I do as well. John Byrne's Fantastic Four is my favorite Fantastic Four. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people consider that heresy that I'm not picking, the Lee Kirby era. But, I grew up, like you said, I grew up reading that version of the Fantastic Four. And at first, when she joined the team, I was like, well, what is this going to be like 2-3 issues? I mean, this isn't the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four are the Fantastic Four. Thing, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Girl, and Human Torch. You cannot just replace them willy nilly. But then within, I would say, her second or third story arc, I was like committed. Yeah, she's a member of the Fantastic Four now. And I think it also helped that at the time Thing had his own title where you could still follow his adventures.
Yep. And she's just enough, like, they needed muscle for the team, so of course she's bringing that, but she's also bringing the comic relief in a different way, but just like the Thing. So
And an outsider's perspective, because
yep.
while she did become part of the family, she was an outsider to the team at first.
Yep.
So Johnny Storm, goes off, like, yeah, forget that. I just saved your life this afternoon, whatever. And, you know, She-Hulk's all like, oh, so they've heard of me over in Egypt, eh? And she's like, oh, most certainly, She-Hulk. I and my people know all about you. And that's when the way the panel is showing her looking back at at She-Hulk with this kind of smirk on your face. Now you're realizing something's up with this woman.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly subtle, but it's still a cool panel.
No, well, I don't think it was meant to be subtle.
No, I know.
So we cut back to the living monolith at his enormous underground headquarters. Wandering around, he's still got Hassan stuck in the piece of wall in his in his lair outside his inside his master control room, so he can continue to gloat and sneer at him. And
I'm looking at that panel now. I mean, honestly, who wouldn't want to have like their childhood bully
Right.
embedded in a piece of stone, and just for you to walk by and like berate just whenever you felt like it. I mean, that would be pretty cool, especially if you're in like your cool underground like lair, like the the living pharaoh is.
and
That was one of my
Hassan isn't holding back. He's still calling him a wimp.
No, you got to give
right.
it to him. He is not
You
yet.
do.
You got to give it to him, man.
Those two panels actually kind of are maybe what really hit this home for me as being great. Like when I got over to the panel and saw Hassan there still stuck to the wall, that gave me a good laugh. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. They literally took the wall and everything. He's still
Yeah,
stuck.
like they didn't take him out and
Yeah.
put him like behind, in a cage or behind bars. Nah, he's still stuck in that wall. And I do
Right.
like,
And then he
like
says
how,
to the guy who's willing to do all of that, "Wimp."
yeah, exactly. Hey,
That's amazing.
I respect. I give him respect,
Respect,
much
exactly.
respect. But I do like how the living pharaoh is just strolling through his underground lair, and just like the minions as he walks by are just dropping to their knees and and bowing to him and everything like that. I mean, you would think that would impress Hassan, but no. I mean, he's still, like you said, he's still giving it to him. So
And you
Yeah,
see he's
he
got
he.
an army. I mean, there's just
yeah,
Yeah.
hundreds of soldiers, they're worshiping him.
Yeah, it's like a Temple of Doom thing going on here. Um, But yeah, Hassan's not at all impressed that he was willing to like risk and pause his own jailbreak to take the wall that he was stuck into all the way back to his lair just to gloat at him. I mean, I don't know. That's a little impressive, right?
It is. No, it is. It is. I got to give it to the guy.
It's impressive that the minions were able to pull it off too.
Yeah.
Like, there was some like, okay, no, cut there. You cut there. Okay, I got my end. You got your end. Okay, I'm losing my end. I'm slipping. Okay.
Pivot.
Right, right. Did
I
you
wonder
think
if
so?
like Doctor Doom has like a whole basement full of like people who bothered him in Latveria, and he just has them hanging up somewhere and embedded in walls.
How many people do you think had to get left behind to make room for the wall?
At least two.
And do you know? Right? And do you think there was any sort of discussion with the pharaoh? Like, does he mean the wall? You know what? To be safe, let's take the wall too.
I mean, did one of the minions say to him, like, Master, I mean, I don't know if this goes with the furniture in
Right?
the.
We'll get new furniture.
Yeah. Like who decided the wall? Is it a situation where he's now fused to this wall? Is it a situation where they were in such a rush they were like, screw it, we'll take the wall too? Like, I just want to know. But I love it.
So we cut back to New York, and the Fantastic Four, conducting their experiments. They're on a level up above where She-Hulk and the Lady are, and all of a sudden they get an alert that their airspace is being infiltrated, and we see that the kind of like the aircraft that the Living Pharaoh's minions used are now taking up positions over the Baxter Building, and She-Hulk goes rushing off to her battle stations when the woman pulls a device from her coat, flips a switch, and activates some sort of trap that ensnares the Fantastic Well, Johnny Storm, Sue, and Reed Richards in some sort of energy barrier, an inverted pyramid up above them, and the three of them are teleported away.
Yeah, and there's a great panel when they are teleported. They appear in the Living Pharaoh's lair, and he's basically talking to them, and you just see like all of his like soldiers lined up. And I know we're gonna keep coming back to this, but it's great. It's all of his soldiers lined up. It's the Fantastic Four standing there looking up at him because he's kind of on a platform talking down to them, with just Hassan in the background in that in that stone wall just right behind him. I mean, he's kind of like sitting there saying, like, "You see this? Eh? You see what I can do? You see this?"
Yeah, he was,
and it's probably, and it's also for like Hassan's benefit too, where he's saying, "Look at this! I just captured the Fantastic Four." Now, and
exactly.
Hassan doesn't say anything, but in his head, he's probably like, "He's still a wimp."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, you got your army taking on the Fantastic Four. You're not taking on the Fantastic Four.
Right.
So it's now that She-Hulk realizes that she's been played and that the woman was, part of this plan to kidnap Reed, Sue, and Johnny, and she's not one bit happy about it.
No.
And she starts moving in on this woman like, you're going to tell me what happened to the Fantastic Four, and you're going to tell me now. But the woman was like, nope, I'm going to get away. And she picks up a chair to smash out a window to make her escape when, of course, the chair just kind of bounces off, and the woman's like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh. And there's another great...
It's like, yeah, that's Lex hand, sweetheart. Tough as steel. You're not just smashing your way through it.
And it's another great panel with She-Hulk kind of like bearing down on her with like a look on her face of just like anger and frustration and just...
And says to her, and I love this, now you'd better start telling me just what's going on before I start plucking your limbs like daisy petals.
And I was going to say, that was another thing with She-Hulk. There was kind of like an edge to her, maybe because it's She-Hulk. I mean, the Hulk was always thought of in the Marvel universe as a wild card. And also, like, the Thing, for as much as the Thing was powerful, he was always, the ever loving thing. He was always the lovable. He was always the lovable loser. Even if he did, if he was the muscle of the Fantastic Four, I don't think he was. I don't think he would be as terrifying as like She-Hulk would be if you were somebody. If She-Hulk was like bearing down on you.
Yeah, because even when he was like, "It's clobbering time,"
Mm-hmm.
clobbering, that sounds like something the Stooges did to each other.
Yeah, he was always.
He's being rambunctious.
He was exactly. He was always that neighborhood kid from
turns.
Yancey Street. Yeah,
Yeah.
She-Hulk looks like she's gonna kick the shit out of you
Yeah.
and like rip your spine out from your mouth.
A switch flips, and it's just like, uh-oh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So now we cut back to the Fantastic Four, who are, in combat with the army of the living pharaoh or the living monolith, and of course they're the Fantastic Four, so they're acquitting themselves just fine. And Johnny Storm's taking out tanks.
Yeah,
that are running
Silvestri,
around
it really cool with him just flying through like that one tank. And I like how he draws Reed's powers, where he's like he's absorbing the bullets, because Sue says it, where she's like, I forgot to wash my flank, and he's like in front of her just absorbing the bullets with his body just totally stretched out. But I do like how they show them getting KO'd also, because then you just see Reed like with his body all zigzagged around in that one panel.
Yeah, I think they're kind of underestimating Sue here, because let's face it, Sue is the most powerful member of the Fantastic Four.
Yep.
So I think they're kind of trying. I think they're not quite doing her justice, but it's okay. She's still not a damsel in distress.
Yeah, they kind of got to get to where they want to go, so they conveniently forget that she could probably take them all out.
So the battle subsides, mostly because the living monolith calls off his men, basically saying, okay, this really wasn't about killing you. It was about studying you. While you've been using your powers and fighting off my minions, all this apparatus surrounding you has been, taking readings on you, and the cosmic energy that grants you your powers, and I know it's exactly what I need.
Yeah, he's basically going to use them as batteries to power him up even further.
Yes, and just as he says nullify, Reed goes, quickly, Sue, a force field. Oh, but it's too late. They're
glad they remembered then.
So we're back at the Baxter Building, and a squad of his soldiers are in one of their hover flyers just outside the window that the woman tried to smash and escape through, waiting for her to get there, but they can't, because the glass is basically indestructible. So one of them has to make the decision to contact the living monolith and say, we have a situation here. And of course, the living monolith is none too pleased to be interrupted, as he's gloating and is about to set off his major plan, now that the Fantastic Four have been captured and put in these glass tubes to have their energy siphoned off. But he's like, well, the agent we sent into the Baxter Building, we can't extract her. And he's like, you dare interrupt me with such paltry matters? You jump from that ship right now. You go. You just sacrifice yourself. It'll be a better fate than what I have planned for you. But he's like, no, but if you will please look and see who that agent is. And that's when it's revealed that this woman is in fact his now adult daughter, Salome. And
it's amazing that in the middle of this graphic novel that has action, it has basically blockbuster widescreen action, that they take not only a few panels but a few pages for him to actually lament and have to decide what he's going to do.
Yeah,
And
if she was anybody else, he would hit that button, and the necklace she would wearing would incinerate her, and she'd be done with. But this is his daughter.
I mean, there's a panel right there at the bottom of the one page where he basically has his fingers to his mouth, where he's thinking like, what am I supposed to do here?
It's great stuff. Like these close-ups as he's going through this crisis, mostly him through these close-ups are fantastic.
He's beginning to sweat. He's
Mhm.
shaking. He's nervous. I love her. She means more to me than anyone alive. I don't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do.
Luckily, Hassan's there to help.
Exactly. And this
Good
is
old
what I was
Hassan.
saying. This has got to be, as Matt said, it's got to be translated from Egyptian, because he says, "I knew you'd chicken out, you bald-headed pansy." Now, I don't know. I've actually been to Egypt, but I did not hear people talking like that. But again, Hassan, man, you got to. If there was a Whit Bissell for this show, like like for the TV movie
Yeah.
Rewind, Hassan would get the Whit Bissell award, because this
he
guy
probably
does
would.
not let up. He probably has, his spine is mush right now. And
No,
he
I
is
think
still,
He's 50% wall. Or
yes,
actually, I guess
he
like
is,
it's 70% wall.
and he is still busting this guy's balls.
you're a wimp now, and you'll always be a wimp.
But it's great because as he's got the alternating panels with him berating them, then you see a close up of Hassan. You see the living pharaoh looking back, like sweat dripping off his face,
He's
and
a
looking
broken
back.
man.
Yep.
And then he turns and looks at Hassan, and Hassan says, Allah, his eyes.
And just that maniacal look on his face.
And he slams his fist down on the button, and Salome, his beloved daughter, is incinerated right in front of She-Hulk, who is in complete shock and terror of what she's just seen. And then it cuts back to the living monolith going, see, you bully, I'm not a wimp. And he's in tears because he's just done it.
I couldn't believe what I was reading there, especially for the time period.
And
I couldn't believe it. There's no way did I think he was going to kill her. Like no way.
And he's just about to cry when he's like, nope, it's done.
Yeah.
The time for the past is past.
Yeah,
It's
this is
time for my
basically
master plan.
Yeah, this is the catalyst for the rest of the story, because he just goes and as maniacal supervillains are wont to do, flicks a couple switches and draws on the Fantastic Four, the power cosmic that they have flowing within them, and redirects it into him. And on the next page, as you see, like Johnny Storm, Reed Richards, and Sue Storm screaming in pain, all of the power is going into him, and you see him growing into the living monolith, and it's a really great splash page.
Yeah, he grows to about 30 feet tall.
Yeah, the art in this is great, especially that close up sequence where he's debating. And yeah, whenever he pressed that button, like even then, I was just like, nah, they're not gonna kill her off. But then, yeah, she's just a pile of dust.
No, I mean, I love the show, like, but he did, like I said, they could have done the easy way. He could have just been the maniacal supervillain and just was like, nope, too bad, and just killed her. But they show it as, and it's also the thing that finally puts him over the edge, and just leave behind, I think, any kind of humanity.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like there's just no point now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And basically, when this happens, he tells like the minions that they're gonna go. He knew that she was in New York, so obviously he's gonna go there and destroy the city.
So we cut back to New York, and She-Hulk is contacting Captain America about the situation it's actually she's contacting the Avengers, but as Captain America points out, that all the Avengers except for him are in California setting up the West Coast Avengers new base, which was, the West Coast Avengers had just been developed at this time.
This would
So,
be my luck too. I would have been the one to draw like monitor duty when the living monolith decides to like attack New York, and it's like, great, I'm like the only one
well,
here. Now I got to deal with this.
well, as we will find out, thank God it is Captain America that
Yes,
is there.
yes. But I mean, and that's a really brilliant part of the story where you have Captain America. He is not it's not Thor. It's not somebody with who is basically a god or who has godlike powers. It's not the Hulk. It's not even Iron Man who has the suit. It's Captain America. Yes, he's a super soldier, but he's still just a man.
We should point out, well, we don't need to, but I'm just going to point out that it was Jim Rhodes who was Iron Man at this time as well.
That's right. Yep.
So Cap decides, like, you know what? All right, we need somebody to help figure this out, preferably somebody who's worked with both the FF and the Avengers in the past, and somebody who has a basis in science. So he checks the old computer, much like he would if he were a member of the Super Friends, and the computer spits out Spider-Man as the best choice to contact. So, Captain America not really knowing how to get in contact with Spider-Man because he's not a member of any team and he's very secretive as to who he is, goes to the Daily
Well,
Bugle.
if he went to the Daily Planet, he could have got Superman. This could have gotten taken care of really fast.
Real fast, yeah.
And we get an honorary great Captain America moment as, Captain America's moving through the Bugle and everybody's like, could that be? And he goes up to J. Jonah Jameson's secretary and says, I'd like to see Mr. Jameson. Is he in? And she's like, go right in. And Jameson is being J. Jonah Jameson and screaming at somebody over the phone and being all Jameson when, Captain America says, excuse me, could I? And Jameson says, what? Who are you? Captain America. And for the first time, I think, in his entire life, Jonah Jameson is at a loss for words.
Well, let me say, to go back a little bit. First of all, I love that Spider-Man has that reputation that he's like, okay, we need somebody. Reed Richards isn't around. It's not like you said. It's Rhodey, and I love Rhodey as Iron Man, but he's not Tony Stark with this scientific knowledge and stuff. So he's like, who are we gonna call on? Spider-Man. And again, this is the advantage of the Marvel universe and everybody being in New York, and that always drew me to that, where they can all show up. But I do like, I think like this captures with him walking through the Daily Planet, and I said this in Infinity War, when in that scene in Infinity War, when you see the subway car pass by, and then it's Captain America standing there, and I can remember the audience I was with were just like broke into applause, because that's how it should be. Like, people should either be in awe of Captain America for what he represents, or you should be applauding him for what he represents. And I just like that. I love that reaction as he's just walking through the halls of the Daily Bugle. And I do like Jameson when he offers him a cigar and he tells him they're straight from. He starts to say Havana. And he tells them they're from Virginia.
Yeah.
But you would think, and I know it's a comic book. I'm joking around about this, but it's only that they're always like, whenever people are looking for Spidey, it's always like, oh well, you know what? We always know that Peter Parker takes pictures of him, so I
Right.
got to go to the Daily Bugle, and it's like, oh, Peter Parker was just here. And now again, Cap might know. Cap ain't stupid. It's a lot like the Robbie Robertson, where he probably knows that it's Peter Parker, but I do like that he just walks right out and Spidey's like sitting there on a lamppost, like, "Hey, heard you were looking for me."
Yeah, and he's like, "Well, that was quick, Mister." Spidey's like, "Well, I have a good communication network." So Cap and Spidey go back to the Baxter Building, and Spidey starts analyzing the devices that were left behind, and you see. First, She-Hulk and Captain America are there, kind of with him, watching him study, and then obviously they know, well, this is going to take some time. Let's go hang out in the other room, and Spidey comes out. I got it. Maybe. I think. At least, I've isolated the energy configurations, and I think I know how to get this to transport me to wherever the Fantastic Four are. and he's just about to climb up on the table to transport when Captain America, again, proving, he's knows how to strategize and he's a good leader, says, no, Spider-Man, She-Hulk's going to go. We don't know what's on the other end of this. We need to send our most powerful member, and that's She-Hulk. And of course, Spider-Man's like I'm powerful.
I'm strong and agile.
Yeah.
Well, he does say, I feel like I'm talking to a brick wall, which if he did go, he might have found Hassan there, and he could have actually been talking to a brick wall. But I do like that both Spider-Man and like the Human Torch are both checked and just been like, no, She-Hulk. We have She-Hulk here. We don't worry about it, guys. You go stand over there. We have She-Hulk. Don't worry about it.
And I mean, again, that's the truth of the situation. You don't know what you're sending somebody into, and She-Hulk is the most not only the strongest, but the most invulnerable.
I was gonna say she's basically invulnerable, right? Does she even can she breathe? Does she need like a breathing apparatus in deep space and all that?
Yes,
she does. Okay.
Yeah. So while they're having that conversation, we cut to the airport where the living monolith had been flown in on a plane, and the authorities know the plane has landed illegally, so they have it surrounded, and you've got a SWAT team telling them, all right, come on out, and you see a giant fist punch through the roof of the plane, which unfortunately, you look at that panel and you realize that's way out of there's no way if the fist is that size.
I was going to say, it would be kind of cool to see him ripping through the plane and coming out, but there's a reason why in like Godzilla movies and stuff like that, they come from the water, like they'll come up out of the water when they're approaching the city, because did he just spend the entire flight like crouched down in the plane? Like, all right, are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Or at least lying down the length of the fuselage.
But I mean, I'm laughing about it. He basically lays waste to all of the guards and the police and everything. I mean, It cuts from him coming out of the plane, and then it's just him walking toward the city and just bodies strewn and wreckage strewn all over the place.
Yeah, it would be it's a great visual of him tearing himself out of the plane in the next. Yeah. And that's when, just as Spider-Man's about to teleport She-Hulk away, they get the monitor alert, which I'm going to just say is the trouble alert.
The trouble alert, yeah.
And She-Hulk goes running like, I need to get to the emergency control circuit. And Spider-Man's like, we need this now. This is pretty poorly timed. And that's when they get the reports that, a giant living monolith man is rampaging through the city. And Captain America has to make the call, like the Fantastic Four are going to have to wait. Yeah. We need to handle this situation.
The needs of the many and the needs of the few, basically.
Well, and this is very similar to a decision he made in Secret Wars involving the She-Hulk. When the She-Hulk was missing and everybody was worried about her, and they wanted to go off to, fight the forces of doom to make sure she was okay. Captain America's like, yeah, I want to go too, but the fate of the universe is involved here. We need to stay here and monitor. At that time, they were monitoring what Galactus was up to. Yeah, but he makes the point, like, we don't even know if the Fantastic Four is still alive. Mm-hmm. But right now, there's a city here that needs us. We stay here. We do the job. It's a great Captain America moment where he has to make the tough decision, the right decision, even though it's not the popular decision or the decision, that goes with his heart.
Yeah. I mean, as we're going through this, I can see why, especially at the age you were reading this, why this is like your favorite story of all time, because it's all of these characters boil down to their basic essence. And this is one of the best Captain America. It's not a Captain America story, but it's one of the best representations of Captain America that I think you will see. I mean, he is the soldier, but he's not a cold. He knows that he has to do his duty. He will always try to save everyone, and he will try to do the right thing. But he also knows that there are sometimes things that you have to do that are not going to be popular, but you have to do them. And
Yes.
he's the one who has to make those decisions, and he will. But he'll also be the first one there on the front lines, basically, fighting alongside people.
So the three of them jump into the Fantastic Car.
I love the Fantastic Car. There better be the Fantastic Car that looks like this in the movie that comes out next year for the Fantastic Four, because I love the Fantastic Car. Go on, I'm sorry.
The Fantastic Bathtub.
I was gonna say it's like a whirlpool.
Yep.
It's like there should be an NFL player like resting in it.
Well, no, if I was the Thing, I would have filled it up with that. While we're flying around, I would just be like
yeah.
hanging out smoking a cigar.
People getting hit with like warm water.
Yeah, like it's just a Fantastic Four again.
The Fantastic Four and their fantastic jacuzzi.
Or Johnny Storm would have like a bunch of, it'd be probably him in like the smallest like bikini bathing suit with like three like 80s bimbos in there with him. But
absolutely, they're literally flying a jacuzzi.
So they arrive on the scene as the monolith is, basically trashing buildings and causing chaos, and they notice that he's still growing. And She-Hulk is like, we better call for reinforcements. The X-Men, the Defenders, someone. And Captain America's like, no time. Until the authorities can send in troops of their own, we'll have to handle this.
And you were talking about scale before, and this isn't necessarily in the art, but just I like how they establish scale in that you see Cap with basically throwing the shield at him, and he says, I didn't hurt him, and I didn't expect to, but he's making himself a target, so he'll come after him. And then you see Spider-Man basically, trying to web up his feet, and the monolith just rips right through it. Spider-Man, he gives him his best punch, and he's he's like, get my best punch, and it did nothing. It basically hurt his hand, and that shows you it's like, like this is bad, because they might have She-Hulk there, but it's like as I said, like Captain America, yeah, I know he's a super soldier, but when you have basically a monster rampaging through the city, that's not going to help. And he's like ripping through buildings, like we said in the artwork. I mean, you see him, he is just cutting a swath like right through the middle of the city.
Yeah. And Spider-Man has been established as an incredibly powerful character with an incredibly powerful punch. So the fact that he didn't even make the monolith blink is saying something. Of course, what does kind of, again, get the monolith's attention is She-Hulk throwing cars at him.
Yep.
It's like, I see a Subaru got your attention. Let's see what a good old American-made Cadillac can do.
It's a great visual. I love that.
Yeah.
And they're doing, even though they're not really doing any damage, they're distracting him. The monolith's attention is on them. So instead of rampaging further into the city, he's kind of swatting at Cap and She-Hulk as if they're gnats, which is at least a victory of some proportions. Captain America saves a couple of people from falling debris by throwing his shield and being able to shatter it. It's a little questionable, but again, the physics. This is we're deep in the world of Bronze Age comic book physics.
Yeah, we're dealing with Marvel physics. So, but I do like that they give a moment, again, another good character moment to Spider-Man, where he's basically questioning himself. He's like, Cap is saving people, She-Hulk is throwing cars at him. What can I do? Like, I can't do anything. I can't even. He feels, again, it's Spider-Man. He feels like he's useless. But then he died, and he starts to swing away, which She-Hulk's like, basically like, Cap, like, Spider-Man's taking off. What are we doing here?
She says, I never figured him for a coward. And Cap is like, he's not. I know the man. Whatever he's doing, he's got a reason for doing it. We'll just have to. And at that point, the monolith basically swings down at She-Hulk, knocking her through several buildings.
And that's another great visual where you just see her flying through a bunch of buildings. And like a building collapsing onto her.
The look they put on Captain America's face as he's calling out She-Hulk is like he, but then kind of like, this might take longer than I thought. He obviously knows the She-Hulk is capable of surviving what just happened to her. But
I think it's that he was worried about her, but he's also probably thinking like, oh man, like this is bad. If this can happen, like she's okay, but if he can do this to her, then we're screwed.
Well, plus like the way it's drawn and the velocity that is implied by the artwork, like she was knocked through several buildings, but much like a home run might be blasted out of the park, like
Yeah.
she was hit with some velocity.
Now, I mean, we're laughing or joking around about people being stuck in walls and stuff like this, but I wanted to honestly ask you: does it cross your mind seeing like this, like just something like rampaging through the city of New York and knocking down buildings? Do you think about, because again, this is what when I was like, okay, let me go and look up what people think of this. Most of it is talking about the cover because it's the Twin Towers and just like you know his destruction of half of Manhattan. So I mean, does it make you think about it at all?
No, because again, grew up watching the King
Mm-hmm.
Kong and the Godzilla movies, and movies like Independence Day and
Yeah.
War of the Worlds, and
Right.
you know, I,
No, I
That
had
was
to,
the vibe I got.
I was gonna say I had the same feeling. I can
Yeah.
separate art from reality, and because I can remember right after 9/11 with the Spider-Man, the trailer for the first Spider-Man movie where they took out the Twin Towers. It was the thieves like webbed up between the Twin
yeah,
Towers, and it was like right after that everything was all they would take it out of all movies and stuff like that. But it's like you just have to be able to separate it. Again, like we said with like it's Marvel physics. It's like it's the Marvel universe. It's like
yeah, and
by next week, Reed Richards and Tony Stark are gonna like rebuild all the buildings. Damage Incorporated will come and rebuild all the buildings, and most people were evacuated, so everything was okay.
I mean, yeah, had this come out in 2001, they obviously would have changed the cover and
Yep.
maybe even probably held back on the
Right.
release of it, but you know,
Yep.
It would have been like, yeah, they wouldn't have released it until on DVD, like in 2008 or something.
Yeah.
Um, but no, the vibe that I was getting was more along like well, honestly, a lot like the more recent Marvel movies with their big bombastic battles in New York.
Yep.
In this case, just one guy as opposed to hundreds of whatever
Chitauri
whatever creatures
aliens.
were. Chitauri, exactly, yeah. But that was just the same vibe that I got. I'm like, this would make an excellent adaptation, whether animated or live action. Like that's more or less how I felt with this book. Is like it felt as close to having, like, it felt almost like like an excellent movie adaptation
Yep.
that Marvel might have done. Like the scope of this, and it's a graphic novel, so it's obviously longer than a normal comic book, but it's not like as this huge like thick thing. Um, they give this such a big. It gives it such a, I don't know, like the scope feels so much bigger than it really is. It's just really excellently done, and the artwork has so much. The artwork and the writing has so much to do with it.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised when I saw that most people were lukewarm on this. I think they use the graphic novel format to their advantage. I mean, like Matt said
Right.
in the beginning, and I mean that's in the introduction. They wanted to make a big like monster movie, and they do that. And they, I think, and like you said, the artwork, Silvestri. There's some things with scale and stuff like that, but it's like visceral. You feel it, and they're using the medium to their advantage, and they're using the nicer paper, the bigger format. They knew the assignment, and they went for it, and I think it works. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to bring it up because it's kind of like the elephant in the room. So let's go back to the fun stuff now.
yeah. Well, and also a lot has been made that the authorities are doing their best to evacuate
Yep.
civilians from the area as well. All right, so we see that Spidey has gone back to the Baxter building because he feels like since he can't contribute to the battle against the living monolith, he should see what he can do to contribute to the search for the Fantastic Four. So he uses the teleporter, and sure enough, it teleports him to the living monolith secret base. And I love this little exchange as he appears. A bunch of the minions go, the transporter, it's activated, but the master was too large to. It's not the master, it's an infidel. And then you see Spider-Man thinking in a little thought bubble, kill him. And they yell, kill him. And he says, every time.
But then you get to they're giving everybody a little spotlight to shine, and now you get to see Spidey get to cut loose.
Oh, yeah.
And as much as Spider-Man, I mean, he fights like Green Goblin, Doctor Octopus, he's always going to be more of a street level superhero. So he gets to take out the goons, but I mean,
It's an
he
army of
gets
goons.
it's an army of goons, and he gets to take them out. He gets to web them up. He gets to flip over them, beat up a couple of them. So Spidey gets his spotlight here.
He spots the Fantastic Four in their little glass coffins, and like you said, he webs up most of the still conscious minions and goes over to smash the machines, figuring, you know what? Obviously, it must be the Fantastic Four that are being used to fuel the living monolith. So let me destroy this machine. When one of the scientists that works for the monolith comes over and says, "You know what? No, you can't. To destroy these machines would mean death." And at first, Spider-Man thinks, "Oh no, if I destroy the machines, it'll kill the Fantastic Four." But how do I, much like Captain America had to do, he's weighing the lives of three people, his friends, heroes, against the lives of everybody in New York City. And that's when the scientist, no, you don't understand. You shut down these machines, everybody in this building, this underground lair dies, and it will erupt and destroy the city above us, Cairo. And now Spider-Man's like, great, now I have to decide whether I want to trade Cairo for New York.
Yeah, and it's underrated. It's great where he's that decision. It's like, okay, what do you do there? Do you destroy and say like, well, I could do this? I mean, like he's thinking, it's like, well, my friends are there, and that's where I live, and there's millions of people in Manhattan, and do I just destroy this city? I mean, it's and Spider-Man is like the perfect. I mean, any superhero, any hero, you're going to give that decision to. But I mean, Spider-Man, who is always like with the guilt that always weighs upon him, to give him like a decision, like, what do I do?
Yeah, it's one of those. Do you even have the right to make that decision? So we cut back to New York, and the monolith is still growing and continuing his rampage, and talking about how the people are like bugs to him, and he's just going to stomp them, and they'll be smeared on the heels of my. And then he sees like he's about to smash a building that he realizes is a school, and he sees the children on their way, and he stops. He's like, children, and this place is a school, and like where I met Feline, and he stops. And Captain America picks up on this, like he's hesitating. I'd better find out why. And now what we get is quite possibly Captain America's greatest moment ever.
Yeah, and it doesn't involve him beating anybody up or doing any kind of acrobatics or throwing his shield.
Nope. He gets up there to the top of the building, and he starts having a conversation with Abdul. And he's like, Abdul, you've got to listen to reason. And Abdul's like, reason? What is reason? Children are cruel Avengers, and adults are no better, with no better reason. And that's when Captain America's like, no, you're wrong. Some people may be rotten to the core, downright inhuman, but for every one of them, there are dozens of decent, caring citizens. The world is full of good and evil, and he's getting through to them. Abdul is like, you're right. Maybe this rampage I'm going on, despite everything that's happened to me, what I'm doing is, unconscionable. What he's even kind of even thinking though, your philosophy is too simple. How you tell one apart from one. But Captain America is stopping a supervillain's rampage with discussion.
And I love how Silvestri draws the living monolith where he's like sitting amongst the rubble with like his his arms on his knees with his head like down, that he's almost like he realizes what he's doing. And
It's like
he's
an after school special
mm-hmm.
where the rotten kid has been doing all this stuff, and his father's sitting there. Now listen, son.
Yeah,
You
but even like
can't.
the picture of Captain America where he's got like his arm outstretched to him and his face. I mean, that it's a great picture where you could see like he's trying to get to him. And when I mean, I think everybody's been through it where you're talking to somebody and you're trying to get through to them, and you're like straining yourself. Like you could tell he's like leaning forward and straining, like saying, like, I'm trying to make you understand this. And it's something that Cap really believes in, and he's trying to make the living monolith believe this also.
Yeah, you talk about your wife and daughter, how they were killed, but don't you see that's exactly what you're doing now? The
Yeah,
people of this city, they have wives, daughters, sons, husbands, souls as kind and gentle as the ones you've lost. He's reaching this man. Unfortunately, as Cap is having this discussion with him, and just as Abdul is saying, there is wisdom in your words, Avenger. Perhaps a army bazooka team has snuck up behind them, and even though the commanding officer says no, Corporal, not yet, the soldier fires his bazooka, which of course hits the monolith, doesn't hurt him at all. But now the monolith's like, oh, this was all a trick to distract me. You lured me into a trap. And Captain America, more fury than you've ever seen on his
yeah.
face, is like, you fools, we had a chance.
Yeah, the panel before that where the living monolith is saying like it's a trick, it was all a ruse, and you see him like getting back up. That's a great panel. And then like you said, Captain America's face. I mean, you could see the anger and probably the disgust too, where he like screams at them, calls them fools. Because he knows that was their one chance, like you said. I mean, he was stopping him with just words because he knows they're not going to be able to stop him with brute force.
Yeah, and this all could have ended right there. But just as the monolith is standing up to continue his rampage, he falls over. And again, you get the idea of just how powerful She-Hulk is, because a battered and bruised She-Hulk, who had obviously dug herself out of the building, has grabbed him by the ankle and pulled him down.
I think, and that got me thinking, like what Todd just said, if this was made into a movie or like an animated movie, that would be like the stand up and cheer moment where he's ready to like go to punch Captain America, and you just see him fall, and just like the reveal of She-Hulk, because you see on her face like she's bleeding and she's got the dirt and scuff marks on her face. So like you said, she like dug herself out of that building, but she's not quitting either, and she still has the strength to take him to knock him down.
No,
Well,
and so she says, when someone hurts the She-Hulk hurts back. And then they
I
realize, all of a sudden they hear this noise and realize there's, somebody's called in an airstrike on the area. And, She-Hulk yells out, but this is a populated area. And Captain America's will have to assume this sector's been evacuated. And She-Hulk is, swell. I hope the sector knows that.
Yeah.
And they go running off as the, Air Force bombs the area. So now we get, the Air Force blankets the area with bombs, and they think they've got them, when unfortunately a jet pilot finds out too late that the monolith is alive and well, and he just smacks the plane out of the air.
And that's great too. I mean, you just see his eyes behind like his the mask that the pilots wear, and his eyes are just wide because he knows that he's gonna die. I mean, the plane just flies right into his hand,
Yeah,
and is destroyed.
that's a great sequence as well, especially the way it ends, where you just like the plane is disintegrating into the monolith's hand.
Yep, and I mean that's followed by two panels right after that where he is just. I mean, he's basically just wailing on buildings, just knocking buildings down. You see him like stepping on like
The elevated
the
train.
elevated train and destroying that. I mean, it's basically mass destruction.
And then She-Hulk points out that they have another problem they need to worry about, and she points over to a big hole that's been knocked into the street, and they see sparks coming out, and they see like, that last footstep, tore open a Con Ed power cable. Looks like there's enough juice spewing out of that to parboil a herd of rhinos. And that's when Captain America gets an idea, and he asks for a nearby soldier to give him his radio. And he comes up with the plan that he gets in contact with Con Edison and says, I want you to shut down the power running to that cable, but I want you to be ready to turn it back on at full power when I give you the signal. And then She-Hulk's like, oh, I get it. What a great idea. I just hope that the lunatic doesn't spatter when he fries. Maybe we should. And again, we get another fantastic Captain America moment where he stops She-Hulk right in the middle of her talk and says, "We are about to possibly kill a man. I don't consider that a cause for levity."
And it's
And
great how she stammers and says, like, I'm sorry, Cap. I mean, just the respect that he commands from people. And you're right. I mean, that is another great moment because again, this was before like something like Die Hard, and well, I'm not ripping Die Hard because I love Die Hard, but we've all become accustomed to the wisecracking hero who just you're going to kill somebody and you make a wisecrack right after it. But I mean, this is showing in a comic book that Captain America is. I mean, he's laying it right out there. He's like, we might kill somebody, and I'm not gonna make a joke about it because he doesn't take it lightly.
no, he holds life,
Yep.
sacred.
Yep.
And, I've often thought, there's always been the question, did Captain America kill during World War II? And I believe as a soldier, he was probably forced to. But
Sure.
that's always been his thing. It's not that Captain America isn't willing to kill. He just doesn't have to. He's always found another way, around it. It was about this time in an issue of his own comic where he was, again, forced to shoot somebody because they were killing the hostages, and he had disguised himself as one of the terrorists, and he didn't have his shield with him. All he had was the gun he had taken from the terrorist, and he had to shoot and kill that terrorist. And that was, that wasn't something they even dropped. That went. There was a whole story arc about Cap having to deal with the fact, yeah, I had no choice to kill that man, but I still had to kill a man. And that's something he's talking about right here, right now. We're about to take a man's life. Yes, he's a supervillain. Yes, he's destroying a city. But again, it's probably killing him too because I almost had him talked down.
Right.
I almost had him talked down, and now we've reached this decision.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, like a bazooka ago, so what, 30 seconds, 45 seconds ago, he was just about to end it in a much more peaceful way.
So Cap goes after, they get the cable shut down. She-Hulk's holding it. Cap runs after, the living monolith to lure him into the trap, which he does. You see Captain America running by She-Hulk and say, "Be ready." He gets on the radio, tells him to be ready. Just as the living monolith steps into range, She-Hulk puts the cable up against his foot. Captain America gives the command, and all that power is surged into the living monolith. You see him light up. He screeches. He faints. He starts smoking, and he drops to the ground.
And I
And
love you still see people like running away from it, and that gives it more scale where they're just like oh my god, like get out of the way.
he's towering over all the nearby buildings at this
Yep.
point, and he collapses mostly into a nearby park.
Yep.
And everybody's cheering. She-Hulk's all right. Nearby says, "He's dead. Captain America, you did it." And Cap's response, very dour, "I know." And that's something I'm going to have to live with for a long, long time. And She-Hulk spots something and says, "Well, this might help cheer you up, Cap. Here's Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four." And, we find out that Spider-Man has freed the Fantastic Four, and he basically explains that, the way he did it was he thought that if he knew he couldn't destroy the machines, he knew he couldn't shut off the machines without them self-destructing, but he figured that if he turned them up to maximum power, they might shut down on their own safely, which they did. And, everybody's kind of happy and celebrating when they realize the living monolith is not dead and is in fact still growing. But due to his mass, he can't get himself back up. So now they're figuring, well, what are they going to do? How can they, say the city is still at risk? And the monolith is just kind of lying there grinning like, yep, I will still have my revenge. Well, finally, the rest of the Avengers show up, and they come up with a plan to, tie these titanium straps around the monolith, and then Thor will throw his hammer, and hopefully this will drag the living monolith into space. So they try it, but unfortunately, the monolith just has too much mass, and the cable snap, and Thor's hammer comes back to Earth for him. And as they're trying to figure out something else, the rest of the monolith's army attacks.
And that's
And
that panel where they show. I mean, they're basically flying around like the Empire State Building, and it's like an army of, or it's his army with like all their with the
flying
vehicles
craft.
like flying around the Empire State Building. But it's that next panel where you see the citizens lying on the ground, and the one says, "Lord, no, my son is already dead. My home destroyed." And it's like, what have we done? Please, no more. I mean, that's for a comic in 1985. That's pretty deep. I mean, somebody saying that my son is already dead and my home has been destroyed. I, I mean, they're really showing like what this would be like if this really happened. I mean, as much as we can say like, all right, a lot of people evacuated, and when he did fall, he kind of fell into the park. I mean, they're not holding back on some of this stuff.
Nope. And you get this huge this panel of the superheroes fighting off against the army of the monolith's followers, and then you see a bunch of civilians running past the monolith's face that's half buried in the ground, and he's like, look at them running like frightened cowards. I was right. And then he realizes, wait, they're not running away, they're running to join the battle. They're not cowards, they're aiding the superheroes in the defense of their homes. So then you get a panel of the superheroes and civilians fighting against the monolith's army. And then he witnesses, there's this young girl who's about to be shot by one of his ships when a man pushes her out of the way and, sacrifices himself to save her. And again, the monolith witnesses this, and he says, that man, he gave his life for a child he didn't even know. Now, how the monolith knows he didn't know the child is, I guess, irrelevant. But that's when he realizes, and again, it's a little bit after school special because Captain America, who's obviously been nearby, and he hears the monolith talk, is like, no, don't you understand? This is what I was telling you before. There are good people, there are people willing to sacrifice themselves for others. You can't judge the entire world based on, the few horrible people that are out there. And that's when the monolith, again, realizes he's been wrong, and he yells out, stop. He calls off a ceasefire, and everybody, his minion stops, the fighting stops, and he turns to Thor and says, you know what? Throw your hammer again. And Thor's like, well, I don't see what will be different this. And Monolith says, no, it'll be different this time. Because this time when Thor throws his hammer, the monolith uses some of his own energy to kind of push himself off, and the hammer carries the monolith off out into the Earth's outer atmosphere. And the minions, his minions, are like, well, what do we do? And they say, we do what we'll always do, we follow. And they see them get in their ships and fly off into space. You gotta, I don't know how space
they're in
worthy
convertibles.
Yeah.
But again, that's what they were willing to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they flew
That's
out
what I'm
into
saying.
space and died following their master.
And they've established in many panels, like this is in the hundreds, if not thousands. That must have been a sight.
Yeah.
Well, and you got to wonder how many, ships were in, orbit around Earth with these.
Right.
We don't know how far
Yeah.
into space they were able to go.
Right.
But even if those ships, and it's entirely possible those ships were space worthy, because they did seem to have glass coverings for them. But even then, they just flew off into space, because as we find out in the very final pages, the monolith's body just went sailing off, through distant galaxies until it finally came upon another star where he got caught in that star's orbit and became a living planet.
Yeah,
And
but started growing trees like the Genesis project.
that's right. But I do like before that. I mean, the
Yes.
page before that where Cap does say, he's talking to She-Hulk, and he says that his mind was wandering because he even though he didn't actually kill someone, didn't kill a man that day, he made the decision to, and he says that troubles me. And I liked it that there's consequences. I mean, he's still thinking about that. And that's
Yeah.
something that Captain America would do. And again, Spider-Man being
I
Spider-Man,
love
when he's
Spider-Man
like,
here. I
yeah,
love
you want
it.
to talk about
I
angst?
love
He's
it.
like, I came face to mask with the fact that there are things I can't handle. He's
Yeah,
like,
it's the
try
same thing,
jumping that
Spider-Man.
hurdle sometimes.
Same thing, Spider-Man. Same thing.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, like, read the room, man. Come on, dude.
And to beat all that, like, yeah, there's some things I couldn't handle, but what you did find something you could handle, and you saved the Fantastic Four.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know, you were talking about, so yeah, I mean, the living monolith, he does find another star, and he basically turns into a living planet, and that is the end of the graphic novel. But if this was like a Marvel movie, it did just occur to me now. So we would hit the credits, there would be a whole big credits thing. The after credits scene, I think, would be the living monolith's underground base, no one there, but you would just hear, hello, hello, and it would be Hassan still stuck in that brick wall
Oh wow.
by himself, just saying,
Dude.
is anybody here? And that's how that would be the after credits scene.
That's perfect, because
Because
I did
you never
forget
see-
entirely about him.
Because you never see what happened to Hassan.
Well, I'm sure once
That is kinda
Spider-Man
perfect.
freed the Fantastic Four from their coffins, he helped poor Hassan. And
Then you put Hassan
picked on
into
him.
a coffin.
It would have been funnier if, yeah, like that vehicle they all came back in or whatever, to see like Hassan being towed in like a U-Haul trailer or something.
And I do feel bad because we're joking about this. This is a great.
Yelling
The graphic
names to
novel
the
was
monolith
great,
as he's-
but after it was done, I was like, "What happened to Hassan?"
Yeah, I'm sure the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man brought him to the nearest hospital or masonry.
Actually, so, I guess the mid credits thing, it would have basically exactly as you said, except instead of going hello, he would have just muttered "wimp" one last time.
That's right. Yes.
You're
Yes.
still a wimp.
You're still a wimp. I don't even care.
Or worse, he's like, I know you. You're Puny Parker, that nerd from
that Flash and I used to beat up. Well, you know what? We're talking about mid-credit scenes. So I want to do the Red Brown honorary cast selections if they had made this into a movie in 1985 or 1986. So we can
Okay.
cast the Revenge of the Living Monolith movie. Matt, do you want to go first?
All right. So for the Living Monolith, I picked. Again, we're doing this as if it was filmed in the mid '80s,
Yep.
and unfortunately, one of the things is okay, yeah, they're Egyptian characters, but
Exactly.
anybody that's of even near that ethnicity can be picked.
Uh-huh.
So while I'm aware that the people I picked are not Egyptian, I think they would have been picked good picks to play these characters.
Exactly. Yes.
So for the Living Monolith, I picked Amrish Puri. People will know him as the big bad from, as Todd mentioned earlier, the Temple of Doom.
Mm-hmm.
For Fellini, I picked Persis Kambata. Most people know her from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, or Megaforce. Salome, I chose Catherine Bach just because I wanted to, who would have been one of the most stunning women at the time in 1985, and God, she was gorgeous. For Mr. Fantastic, I picked Kent McCord. He played Officer Jim Reed for many seasons of Adam 12. And the nearest he would have been was in he played the precinct captain in Predator 2. For Invisible Girl, I picked Mary Fran. She played
Nice.
Okay.
The wife
yeah.
of
She was Newhart's
Bob
wife
Newhart.
in
Yeah.
Newhart.
Right.
Yep.
There
Yep.
you go.
For Human Torch, I went against type and I cast William Zabka.
Ah.
And that was mostly
Okay.
mostly, if you look at the face Johnny Storm is
Yeah.
making when in one of those panels, I looked at that and like, that's Billy Zabka. That's
I did think about it, but I chose him last time when we did the Death of Gene DeWolf. So I didn't want to. I can't remember who I chose him for, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to pick him again. That's a good choice.
For She-Hulk. I picked Cheryl Baldinger. She was Sunny in American Gladiators. And she was, I was like, we had discussed, Bridget Nielsen was obviously a pick, but I thought that was maybe a little too obvious.
Mm-hmm.
She had the right height. She had the right physique. Her acting chops, I'm not so sure, but she would have looked the part, definitely.
Yeah.
For Captain America, I picked John Allen Nelson. He's in a bunch of things, but he played the hunk in Hunk. The nerdy guy that was turned into.
Yes.
Yeah. And for Spider-Man, I stuck with Michael J. Fox because I figured we would have signed him to a multi-picture deal.
Did you pick Hassan?
I really couldn't think of anybody to pick for Hassan.
All right, I picked Hassan. I'm going to see if I want to see it. Todd, did you do the red brown casting?
Just a couple.
Okay.
Just a couple. So for the Living Monolith, I picked Alfred Molina.
Nice. There you go.
I mean, granted, it's looking ahead in time with his turn as Dr. Octopus, but seeing him do Dr. Octopus makes me realize, I think he would have been an excellent Living Monolith. I think he could have played the entire range of it. For Captain America, I bounced around a bit, but I decided I went. So this is what, mid '80s, yeah. So I went with Harry Hamlin because he can wield a shield.
Okay.
For Mr. Fantastic, I went with William Hurt. For Invisible Girl, I went with Michelle Pfeiffer, or Invisible Woman, I guess. I went with Michelle Pfeiffer. For Spider-Man, I went with Timothy Hutton. I wanted to see Spider-Man.
I like
Timothy
that.
Hutton. Timothy Hutton rather as Spider-Man, but only because I didn't want to piggyback off of Michael J. Fox, which I think is a really good choice. Like, I can't deny it.
I like that. They're so far they've all been good. All right, for me, I went a little more well known. Marvel in our reality in 1985, they were really hoping this was going to be a big movie. So for the Living Monolith, I went with F. Murray Abraham.
Okay.
And again, like, I know they're gonna, like, they're not gonna like, this is good, I almost went with and now, why the heck can I? Who played Gandhi?
Ben Kingsley.
Yes, I almost went with Ben Kingsley. And it's
almost went with him as well.
Yeah, and it's like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, they're not gonna they're gonna just hire somebody and darken his skin a little bit, and they're not gonna care if it's 1985. So I went with F. Murray Abraham. I think he could, the special effects wouldn't be that great, but I think his voice would work for the character. For Captain America, this was going to be the role that, like, really broke him. I went with Kevin Costner, 1985 Kevin Costner.
Okay.
As Captain America. For Spider-Man, Jason Bateman.
Okay.
I almost picked him, but he would have been about 16, I think, at the time.
Well, we could say Spidey was still in high school.
Too young, you think?
Yeah, we could say he was still in high school. I know this Spider-Man was supposed to be his college Spider-Man, but we could say he was still in high school. Mr. Fantastic, I picked Kevin Kline.
Nope. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. I like it.
For the Human Torch, this one, it's a little obvious, and it's kind of going against type. I picked Anthony Michael Hall just because I know then he was doing nerdy characters, but maybe this could have been his. This could have been his chance to grab the crown as a teen heartthrob. So I picked Anthony Michael Hall for the Human Torch. For the Invisible Girl, I went with Linda Hamilton.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. For She-Hulk was a tough one. I did not want to go with Brigitte Nielsen because it was so obvious, and I was just like, who could, like, if it's 1985, they're not doing it CGI. Even now, I don't know if it's going to work, but I went with Gina Davis as the She-Hulk.
she's got
She's got the height. She's got the
Yeah.
height.
Well, I'll
She's
tell
got
you.
the height. She's got the right look. I could definitely see it.
Slap
if you
some
green
green
her
paint
up.
on. Slap some green paint on her. Come on, it's 1985 She-Hulk.
So,
Before I was looking at the American Gladiators, I was going through the entire roster of gorgeous ladies of wrestling.
There you go.
Right. So I have a question about She-Hulk actually.
Yeah.
As she compares to the Hulk, right? Because
Mhm.
I look at the Hulk, Bruce Banner. He's what 5'7", 5'8", 130, 40 pounds or so. When he turns into the Hulk, he's like 7, 8 feet and like 1,500 pounds and looks it. She-Hulk doesn't look all that much larger than like a decent size athletic woman.
Well,
Is
it's
there a
also
reason?
different
Like she's
because
not huge.
she got her powers from she got a blood transfusion from him,
Got it.
so it affects her differently. Yeah, I mean she grows a little bit, but she's not as
I think
big as he is.
I think she gets close to 7 feet when she's.
Does she?
Yeah, I think
It's
so.
it's hard to
Because
tell. I mean,
remember,
maybe it's
Captain
just the way it
America's a
is.
big dude too.
Okay, I was gonna say
Captain
because like
America's over 6 feet tall.
okay, all right. Because I mean, yeah, like she seems to be tall, I guess, for a woman, but not like the difference in proportion between Banner and Hulk. Is it's not the same,
Yeah.
but it just affects her differently. Like, but I mean,
Well-
but otherwise, like she has pretty much the same in vulnerability and strength and so on as the Hulk, right?
Yeah, and also, the Jennifer is, her human form, which she very rarely transformed back into, was a very small woman too. So
Yep.
again,
Got it. Okay.
her
Yeah.
proportions to her human, form is radical.
Okay, I got it. So I should be thinking of her in her human form should be far more petite, probably much smaller.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. All right, real fast. I want to finish because with am I saying her name wrong? Is it Salome? How am I supposed to?
Salome.
Salome. I went with Ray Dawn Chong.
Ooh.
I was trying to. I was like, what is like the most 1985 actress? It was either going to be her or Jennifer Beals.
No, Radon.
She would have been a good pick too.
Yeah, I think I was like, I gotta like, I need to make it 1985, and Ray Dawn Chong would have been great.
That is as 85 as it gets. Yeah, that's a perfect one.
Is it?
Why didn't I think of her?
Yeah, is it Faline? Am I saying it right, or is it?
I think it's Feline.
Feline. I
Yeah.
picked
Iman.
I almost picked Iman for She-Hulk, but she wasn't.
There
tall
you go.
enough.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, like I needed like something 1985, and for the person who somehow became the star of this podcast, for Hassan, I didn't realize we were going to be talking so much about Hassan. For Hassan, I picked John Turturro.
Okay, but Hassan does have a pivotal role in the story.
Oh,
and
yeah.
John Turturro, again, he's a guy. You need an Italian, John Turturro. You need somebody to be Spanish, John Turturro. You need somebody who's Egyptian, John Turturro. And that's what they were going to do back then. They were not going to cast somebody of Egyptian nationality. They were going to pick somebody else. So John Turturro. Can't you just see him like embedded in that wall, just making snide comments to the Living Monolith? He'd be perfect.
You just during the casting session, I just need to hear you say "wimp."
So every day I was on the set for 8 hours when they could put me in the wall.
Seriously,
I actually just thought of somebody, Benicio del Toro.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he would have been good. I mean, I'm trying to think of how old he would have been then. What was his first? Was his first like not big role, but he was in like the License to Kill, right? Wasn't that one of his first in '89?
Yeah, late '80s, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see Benicio del Toro. Oh, that would have been great. I cannot believe that. Who was it?
Now connecting to that, what can I think of his name? Maniac Cop, Goonies.
Oh, I know, Robert Davi.
Yes.
Davi.
Oh, Robert Davi. Jeez.
Yeah, he played his boss.
I could definitely. He would have been good too. He would have been good too because he would have had like the physicality to been like the kind of bully, and
Yeah.
then you could buy him as like a prison guard or something like that. Yeah, he would have been good too.
Yeah, I
And
can
very
hear his
1985.
His voice going, wimp. And then driving me
Definitely.
to electrocute my own daughter.
Well, you know what, guys? I did not think that we were going to be spending this much time on Hassan when we were talking about the revenge of a living monolith, but I'm glad that we did. But I think I don't think I'm talking out of turn when I could say, well, we know that this is like Matt's favorite comic book storyline of all time, which I didn't know. I knew that this was like your favorite Captain America story, but I didn't know that it was that you held this in such high regard.
It's the perfect blend of, adventure, pathos, comic book style silliness, but still, a very serious take on the comic book style silliness.
Oh yeah.
It's basically War of the Colossal Beast, an incredibly silly movie, but they hit all the points. They have it just so finely tuned between those comedic moments and the suspension of disbelief you have to have even within a comic book story. I love it. The villain is perfectly, just so often like you get the maniacal villain who cares nothing and is just, so chaotically evil, the story becomes boring. I it has been a long time since I've been able to enjoy a Joker story because he is just so beyond evil and so insane. It's just it bores me. There's nothing human in that character anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, after reading this the first time and then going online and seeing people's reactions to it, I actually read it again because I was like, okay, maybe, I don't understand why this,
And
like, it doesn't need to be held up as like one of the greatest stories ever, but as a enjoyable, fun, like you said, there's adventure, there's comic book style. I wrote it on one of the Facebook posts. I mean, it's like a summer movie blockbuster in comic book
Exactly.
form.
and I love the
100%.
fact that it's not a continuity changing storyline.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of those and nothing was the same for the next 12 months until they
And even though
rebooted
it's
it.
not changing continuity, like you said, it still doesn't shy away from having two characters stop in the middle of wanton destruction and talk for a little bit. And it doesn't shy away from having Captain America say that, I'm not going to make a joke because I might kill somebody. And it's not going to shy away from at the end, Captain America saying, I almost killed someone. And that's something that, is going to affect me.
Well, it didn't shy away from the monolith blowing up not blowing up, I guess evaporating his daughter
Mm-hmm.
either, which was
and,
super dark. And
and
then yet in that same in the same comic you also have, and this is one of the comic things that I just kind of loved when I saw it, is one of the cultists, the scientist cultist who's wearing that lab coat.
Yes, yeah, I forgot to mention that.
He's got to have the lab coat. I just love
how else would we know
Like,
that
that's
he's a
perfect.
scientist?
Right? Like that's just the perfect touch to
Yep.
make this both a comic book but also a brilliant story.
Wait,
as
are you
point-
saying that comic books can be fun?
Exactly.
No way.
That and Hassan in the wall, like that's in the same comic, and I love that. I absolutely love
That's
that.
gonna be my band name, by the way. Hassan in the wall.
Hassan on the wall. Oh, that's good.
as you pointed out, there was that panel of the civilians like, oh my God, how much more do we have to deal with? My son's dead, our homes are destroyed. How many times have you read a comic book with buildings being knocked down, but you never see the impact it has on the civilians? And a lot of times, in a story, especially like Superman, will mention, well, this building was scheduled to be knocked down next week anyway, so I'm saving the taxpayers, blah, blah, blah. No, this had real impact, human impact on, the everyday people, which you don't often see in a comic book, especially at that time. Again, today so much more has been done with comic books to make them more serious and make them more realistic. And to me, the moment you try to make a Superman story realistic, you've lost the battle. You've already, misunderstood the assignment. But, I'm not here to judge on what's coming out now and what people enjoy now. But you got to remember, there's an entirely different context to the story, an entirely different atmosphere of comics in 1985.
Yeah. Well, for one, I am glad that you suggested this, because this was the first time I read it, and it's going to be something I give my son to read and just say, like, here, you want to read a good comic book story? Read this. And that's something I would have been looking for in 1985 as an 11, 12-year-old. Just a really cool. This is like, it's something you want to go outside in the summer, like sit on the porch, or sit like on your step, or sit like on the beach and read this and just have a good time with it. And you know,
I'm sorry. Fully accessible too. Like all you really
yep.
need to know is just to have the most passing understanding of who Captain America and Spider-Man and so forth are. Like it's a fully accessible book.
I think for Captain
Fully
America
contained.
fans in particular, this is a must read.
Yeah, he comes out the best in this. In this, I like Captain America as a character, but like reading this, I have gained more. You know what I mean? I have gained more respect. I always said, I brought up like the scene in Infinity War. I always said, like, that's what, like, Superman in recent movies never got that kind of recognition. That's what Superman should be for DC, and for Captain America. And I know it's taken as like it's funny as he's walking through the Daily Bugle, but that's how it should be with Captain America. He should be seen in that way, and this storyline just shows why, because it shows his values, it shows him as a leader, and it shows that he does, when he can, tries to solve things without fighting, without killing. That's no matter that he is the super soldier, he's still always going to be that guy from Brooklyn who just wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah, no, he's the epitome of a hero.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, this one was really great. I hope. I mean, if hopefully whoever does listen to this, if they want to let us know if they've never read this before, if they have and they have any thoughts on it, I would love for them to give us a shout out on email. You can email us on facesbases1@gmail.com. You can find Matt and Todd on the TV Movie Rewind podcast every week. And basically, I think, what do we for the next one? We still haven't decided yet. I think it's going to be between Son of the Demon and Batman Year 2. So maybe that'll be a surprise for the next one. I mean, I'll put stuff out on Facebook beforehand, but I don't even know what we're going to do next. But I think it's going to be one of those.
They're both controversial stories, to be sure.
Ooh, I can't wait.
But I really would like to come to the defense of Batman Year 2.
Yeah, I'm thinking. You know what? We're calling it now. We're doing Batman Year 2 for the next episode. Controversial, and also there is no Hassan in a brick wall, so it's not going to be as enjoyable as this episode was.
Oh, I have a lot to say about Todd McFarlane's storytelling.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
I'm willing to bet it'll have nearly as much Thor as Revenge of the Living Monolith did.
And maybe he appears on the covers of all the issues. You never know.
Do you think he's on there just because 6 is an even number?
Probably.
Right. I don't know. Maybe Thor's was one of their higher selling titles at the time, so they figured putting Thor on there might, give them more sales. But yeah, it definitely should have been the Invisible Girl.
You should have asked Dave Michelini when you saw him a couple weeks ago.
I should have, because I had him sign my copy.
I know.
Revenge of the Living Monolith, but I think that might have been more of a Mark Silvestri question.
Yes, I know. But Mark Silvestri wasn't there, so we're gonna have to find Dave Michelini on Twitter and tell him this episode's coming out.
After the burning question.
Actually,
yes.
I should have asked Jim Shooter. He probably would have known.
Yes, he probably would have. You're right. And he would have went on and let you know about it, too.
It may have even been his decision.
Yeah, I'm sure he would have said it was. But if we do get in contact on Twitter with Dave Michelini, I don't even know if he's on Twitter, but you can look for us on Twitter on I'm just laughing about thinking about asking Jim Shooter like pontificating about about the living monolith. And yeah, we'll see you next time. As we just said, we just came to the decision now that we're gonna do Batmania 2, so that's gonna be fun. So we will see you in a week or two.
See you around the spinner racks, people.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go to Marvel Comics and I'm gonna tell them I want to do like a story on Hassan. I want to do his background story.
We could all use a good friend like Hassan, right?
Yeah.
You know, Hassan's the kind of guy where like you could just get into an accident, total your car, and he'd be like, "And you still suck," or he'd like remind you that your team lost or something. He's like that guy.
We all have a Hassan in our lives. You know we do.
Like, damn it, Hassan. You're not helping.
Like even the minions are probably sitting there like, you know what? I mean, this guy. I know his his whole body has been turned into hamburger and he's embedded into a wall, but
I just love the fact that he spends the rest of the comic book at a wall.
It does. I know it's supposed to be serious.
With no explanation as to why exactly he's stuck there. Like, is it glue? What? Is it just
not at
is
all.
He just more wall than person now? Like, what's the deal?
He's more wall now than man.
It wouldn't
like,
surprise
that's
me.
An origin story right there. Wall
if
man.
his back is in fact broken and he can't move.
Yeah, he can't move.
Right, but he's still like he's being held up by whatever. You know what I mean? Like he is stuck to that wall somehow. And I just really want to know how.
This is definitely going at the end of the episode. It's just going to be the Hassan talk.